It was a peaceful morning on Earth, one of those rare days when everything seemed normal. The sun shone brightly over the quiet suburban town of Clearwater. Birds chirped in the trees and children played in the yards, their laughter echoing through the streets. Life was simple, calm, and everything felt safe. But no one knew that this tranquility was about to be shattered, forever. At the heart of Clearwater, a little girl named Emily was playing in her backyard. She was just like any other child, enjoying the warmth of the sun on her skin, laughing as she chased butterflies across the open field. Her golden hair shimmered as she ran, her eyes sparkling with the innocence of youth. To her, the world was a wonderful place, filled with adventure and endless possibilities. She had no idea that her world was about to be turned upside down in an instant. Without warning, the sky above her began to change. The bright blue that had stretched so peacefully across the heavens now seemed to ripple, as if something enormous was moving just beyond the clouds. At first, Emily thought it was a plane, perhaps a distant military jet, or maybe a weather balloon. But then, the unthinkable happened. The air around her grew still, unnaturally quiet. The birds stopped chirping, the wind ceased, and a strange, heavy silence hung in the air. Suddenly, a bright light blazed from the sky, nearly blinding her as it descended toward the earth. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The light grew larger, moving with unimaginable speed. Within moments, it was upon her. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a weather balloon. No, this was something far more terrifying. An alien craft. The ship, unlike anything Emily had ever seen, hovered just above the ground. It was shaped like a massive disk, covered in sleek, silver armor. Pulses of blue light shot out from it, bathing the surroundings in an eerie glow. The air shimmered around the craft, distorting the landscape like heat rising off a hot road. Emily's legs froze to the spot, her body paralyzed in fear. Her breath caught in her throat, and she couldn't look away. Her heart pounded, louder than she ever thought possible. Before she could move or scream, the craft descended rapidly, its landing gear touching the earth with a soft thud. A small hatch on the underside of the ship opened, and two tall, shadowy figures emerged. They moved with unnatural grace, their limbs long and fluid, their faces obscured by dark helmets. The figures did not speak. They did not need to. The air itself seemed to hum with their presence. Emily tried to run, to escape, but her legs refused to obey. Her feet were rooted to the ground, her body trapped by an invisible force. One of the figures approached her slowly, the other scanning the surroundings, ensuring no one else was near. Emily's heart raced in terror as she finally found her voice. "Please, don't hurt me," she cried, her voice barely a whisper, barely a sound over the deafening silence of the moment. The alien figure reached out, and Emily flinched, but instead of a weapon, the figure's hand gently wrapped around her arm, lifting her off the ground as if she weighed nothing. Her body went limp, her vision spinning, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Was this a dream? A nightmare? It couldn't be real. But it was real. In an instant, she was lifted into the air, higher and higher, her feet dangling helplessly below her. The craft's hatch slowly closed, sealing her inside the metallic belly of the ship. The strange blue lights flashed brighter, and the ship began to ascend. The earth below her seemed to fall away faster than she could comprehend. The figures in the craft remained silent, as if nothing unusual was happening at all. They were simply doing their job. Emily tried to scream again, but her throat was tight, her voice lost in the overwhelming fear that surged through her body. The craft continued to rise, breaking through the clouds, until Earth's landscape was nothing more than a distant patchwork of green and blue. She was leaving everything behind. Her home, her family, her life. The alien ship continued its journey into space, traveling faster than Emily could even fathom. The familiar world below her seemed impossibly far now, a world she may never see again. As the ship entered the depths of space, the weight of her situation began to settle in. She was gone. Kidnapped by creatures from beyond the stars, Emily was no longer on Earth. She was now in the hands of beings from a galaxy far away. Suspense hook. Why did the aliens take her? What could they possibly want with a child from Earth? And what will Earth do to bring her back? Back on Earth, Emily's family was just beginning to notice her absence. Her mother, calling out for her from the kitchen window, would soon be the first to realize that something was horribly wrong. The world's governments were also about to be alerted to the fact that a human child had been taken by alien forces, a kidnapping like no other, one that would spark an unimaginable response from Earth's military forces. In that moment, the galaxy had just become a far more dangerous place for the aliens who dared to steal from Earth. The news spread like wildfire across the globe. The kidnapping of Emily, a small child from a quiet suburban town, had taken the world by surprise. In a matter of hours, every news channel, every radio station, and every internet feed was flooded with the shocking story. Governments scrambled for answers, military leaders were called to action, and millions of people looked up to the skies, wondering if their world would ever be the same again. The United Nations convened an emergency session, and world leaders were forced to come together, unified by one terrifying truth. The human child was no longer on Earth. Her captors were not of this world. The aliens had taken her to the unknown reaches of space, and there was no telling what they wanted with her. In every corner of Earth, fear was building. Families huddled in their homes, watching the news, wondering if their own children were safe. Soldiers began to mobilize, and the world's defense systems were put on high alert. Yet despite all the preparation, one burning question remained. How could Earth fight back against an alien race that had the power to travel across the stars? The answer came quickly, and it was as unexpected as it was massive. Earth had a weapon, one that was far more advanced than anything the world had seen before. It had been in development for years, a secret known only to the highest-ranking officials and the most trusted military leaders. It was called the Supercarriers -800,000 massive, heavily armed ships designed not just for defense, but for a full-scale, offensive strike. Each one of these ships was larger than any city, equipped with the most powerful weapons humanity had ever created. Laser cannons, missile silos, and fleets of drones capable of decimating entire armies. The supercarriers were Earth's last line of defense, and now they were humanity's best chance to retrieve the child and fight back against the alien invaders. The decision was made. The time for diplomacy and negotiation was over. Earth's military forces would go to war, not only to recover Emily, but to send a message to any alien force that dared to harm humanity. Do not underestimate us. The commanders of Earth's military knew that this was no ordinary battle. The alien forces were unknown, unpredictable, and far beyond Earth's technological reach. The supercarriers were powerful, but they were also vulnerable. The aliens could strike at any moment, and Earth needed to be prepared for the worst. For days, the world watched as Earth's military mobilized. Every country contributed resources, troops, ships, technology, to form a united front. The supercarriers were deployed from hidden military bases, one after another, each ship slowly rising into the sky, disappearing into the vastness of space. The air was thick with tension, and the uncertainty of what awaited them was palpable. While the supercarriers were preparing for war, the world's best scientists and engineers worked around the clock to improve the technology of Earth's fleets. Weapons were upgraded, shields reinforced, and new tactics developed. Earth's goal was clear: retrieve Emily at all costs and make sure the aliens knew that Earth was not a world to be trifled with. Despite the preparations, no one could predict what would happen next. Was the alien force simply a small group of invaders, or was it part of a larger empire? What exactly did the aliens want with the child? Questions raced through everyone's minds, but there were no answers. All Earth could do was prepare for the inevitable. As the fleets of supercarriers launched into space, the world held its breath. Millions of people watched, Some hopeful, some terrified, but all united by a single purpose. Earth would not let this stand. Suspense. Look. Will Earth's supercarriers be enough to take on the aliens? Can humanity truly fight back against a force that can disappear into the stars? And most importantly, will they be able to bring Emily home? The supercarriers began their journey into the unknown, leaving Earth behind. They moved as one, a massive, powerful force in the darkness of space. But as they ventured deeper into the cosmos, the questions grew louder. Would the aliens be waiting for them? Was Earth prepared for the scale of this conflict? The countdown had begun, and the fate of one little girl and the entire planet hung in the balance. As the massive fleet of Earth's supercarriers ascended from the atmosphere, their sleek, metallic forms disappeared into the darkness of space. One by one, they formed a tight formation, a wall of strength that stretched across the stars. Every ship was equipped with thousands of drones, all ready for battle. The crews on board were prepared for a conflict unlike anything humanity had ever faced. In their minds, the mission was simple: recover Emily, show the galaxy that Earth would not be intimidated, and make the aliens pay for their audacity. The journey into space was swift. The ships passed through Earth's protective atmosphere, leaving the pale blue planet behind. It was a strange, almost surreal moment. Seeing Earth from afar, the world that had been their home now shrinking behind them. It was a reminder that humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future. They were fighting for their way of life. As the fleet continued its voyage, Earth's military commanders kept in constant communication with each other. They were all in agreement. The mission needed to be executed with precision. Emily's kidnapping had shaken the world, and failure was not an option. They had no idea what they were up against, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. The tension inside the supercarriers was palpable. Every soldier, every officer, was filled with the knowledge that this mission could very well be their last. Space was an unforgiving place, and no one knew what awaited them. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown dangers, and the aliens who had taken Emily were clearly no ordinary foes. They soon approached a dark, distant corner of the galaxy, a place where no human had ever ventured before. It was there that Earth's military believed the aliens were hiding. The area was shrouded in mystery, a void where no signals could be detected. No one knew what lay beyond the stars in that part of the universe. The only thing they knew was that the aliens had established a base somewhere within that darkness, and they would stop at nothing to protect it. As the fleet entered the unknown sector, an eerie silence filled the communication channels. The typical hum of Earth's technologically advanced systems, the chatter between the ships, and the constant communication with Earth's command center fell into a strange, unsettling quiet. The supercarriers had never been this far from home, and the darkness of deep space seemed to press in on them from all sides. It wasn't long before the first signs of the alien presence were detected. At first, it was faint, a signal, barely perceptible. Then it grew stronger, and more appeared, scattered across the darkness like little glimmers of light. Earth's commanders were watching intently from their stations, trying to make sense of the data. Something was out there, and it was moving quickly. Then, the scanners picked up a massive formation of ships. Hundreds of alien vessels, unlike anything Earth had ever seen, appeared on their screens. They were enormous, far larger than any human ship. The alien fleet was vast, stretching across the stars like an ocean of metal and energy. It was clear now. These aliens were not a small band of raiders, as some had suspected. No, they were a full-fledged empire. The alien ships seemed to materialize out of thin air, their sleek designs glinting in the dim light of space. They were fast, incredibly fast. Within seconds, they closed the distance between themselves and Earth's fleet, and that's when the first wave of attack came. Laser blasts lit up the dark expanse, streaking toward the supercarriers with deadly accuracy. The Earth fleet returned fire, but the sheer size of the alien armada was overwhelming. Earth's ships fired their weapons in a desperate bid to defend themselves, but the alien ships were already too close. The battle had begun. Explosions echoed through space as the first supercarrier was hit. It shuddered violently as alien energy blasts tore through its armor. The ship's defensive shields held for a moment, but the intensity of the alien firepower was unlike anything Earth had ever faced. The supercarrier shuddered again, and with a deafening roar, the shields collapsed. The ship's hull buckled under the pressure. Inside, the crew worked desperately to maintain control, but they were being overwhelmed. They needed to fight back, and fast. The drones launched from the supercarriers, swarming like a cloud of wasps, engaging the alien ships in combat. It was chaos, blasts of energy, plumes of fire, and streaks of light filled the blackness of space. But even as Earth's forces fought with all their might, the alien fleet seemed to be relentless. It was clear they had come prepared for this fight. The battle raged on, Earth's forces slowly retreating back into the formation as they tried to regroup. They had underestimated the strength of the alien armada, and now the fight for Emily's life was more dangerous than ever before. The question remained, could Earth's supercarriers survive the onslaught of the alien fleet? Could they ever hope to win against such an overwhelming force? Suspense hook. The war for Earth's survival had just begun. With the alien fleet closing in, will humanity have what it takes to overcome the odds and bring Emily back? And if they fail, what will happen to the rest of Earth's future? The fate of the supercarriers and their crews now hung in the balance. In the cold, dark expanse of space, the ultimate test of human strength and courage had only just begun. The air in the command centers of Earth's supercarriers was thick with tension. The initial battle had thrown humanity into disarray. The alien fleet, with its overwhelming numbers and advanced technology, had caught the supercarriers by surprise. It was clear that Earth's military was in a fight for survival, not just for the life of Emily, but for the future of humanity itself. For hours, the two fleets clashed in the vast emptiness of space. Explosions rocked the calm, dark void, and the once pristine starry sky was now filled with the violent flashes of laser fire. The supercarriers had taken heavy damage, but they weren't ready to give up. They had come too far, and they were willing to fight until the very end. Inside the command center of one of the supercarriers, Admiral Jackson sat at the head of a long table. His face was grim, but his eyes burned with determination. His hands moved over the holographic displays, calculating the movements of both fleets. He could see it all, the alien ships closing in, the Earth ships retreating, the firepower being unleashed. It was chaos. But in the midst of that chaos, Jackson saw something. He saw an opening. The alien ships had a weakness. There was a gap in their formation. The larger ships were slower, and their defenses were strong, but the smaller, faster ships, the ones acting as the scouts and harbingers of the larger fleet, were vulnerable. If they could take out those smaller ships, it might create enough of a distraction to turn the tide of the battle. Jackson wasted no time. He immediately issued orders to all supercarriers to change their strategy. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. They would need to deploy their fighter drones in a daring strike against the alien scouts. It was a high-risk maneuver, but it might just be enough to break the alien momentum. Meanwhile, aboard the supercarrier Kestrel, Captain Melissa Grant stood at the bridge, her eyes fixed on the battle unfolding before her. She had led her crew through countless simulations, training for a moment like this, but nothing could have prepared her for the scale of the enemy they now faced. "Deploy all fighter drones," she barked, her voice firm. "I want every single one of those alien scouts eliminated. No mistakes. We cannot afford to let them regroup." Her crew moved quickly, the drone bays opening up, releasing hundreds of small, agile crafts into the fray. These drones were Earth's best weapons against the alien ships. While the supercarriers could take down the larger, more heavily armed vessels, these drones were designed for speed and precision. They darted through space, zipping between laser blasts, targeting the vulnerable alien ships. The battle was fierce. The drones swarmed the alien fleet, taking out ship after ship in rapid succession. But the aliens fought back with everything they had. Their ships fired bursts of energy so powerful that even Earth's strongest shields were nearly destroyed. The drones engaged in close-quarters combat, dodging lasers and launching counterattacks. The stakes were higher than ever before. And then, the unexpected happened. A massive explosion rocked the space around the Supercarriers as one of the alien flagships was hit directly by a coordinated drone strike. The flagship, which had seemed invincible moments before, now drifted silently in space, a massive hole torn through its hull. The sudden loss of their command ship threw the alien fleet into disarray. It was a moment of vulnerability, and Earth's fleet seized it with everything they had. "Now's our chance," Admiral Jackson shouted, his voice booming over the intercom. "All ships, focus fire on the remaining enemy capital ships. We can win this." Earth's supercarriers launched everything they had. Missiles, laser blasts, and drone strikes filled the void of space as the battle raged on. With their flagship down, the alien fleet's coordination began to break down. Without their leader, they were now disjointed, disorganized. It was the break that Earth had been waiting for. Captain Grant's ship, the Kestrel, led the charge, pushing forward with relentless determination. The once vulnerable supercarriers were now in full offensive mode, firing in synchronized waves, hitting the alien ships with precision. Slowly but surely, the alien fleet started to retreat, their once mighty armada weakening under the constant assault. But there was no time to rest. The war was far from over, and the fate of Emily, and the survival of humanity, still hung in the balance. Even though Earth had taken the upper hand, the alien forces were far from defeated. The alien homeworld remained out of reach, and the battle for Emily was still ongoing. Suspense book. The tide had turned, but the fight was far from over. With the alien fleet on the retreat, what would Earth face next? Could they find Emily in time, or had the aliens already planned their next devastating move? As the supercarriers pressed on, Earth's fleet now pushed deep into enemy territory. They had gained the upper hand, but the final confrontation was still ahead. Would the battle be enough to bring Emily back? And if they succeeded, what would be the cost of victory? The battle had reached its breaking point. After hours of grueling combat, Earth's supercarriers had finally managed to push the alien fleet back. The once dominant armada now found itself fractured, its forces scattered and weakening with every passing minute. The tides had turned, but the war was far from over. The aliens had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now Earth's forces were closing in on the heart of the enemy's territory. Captain Melissa Grant, her face set with determination, stood at the helm of the Kestrel. The supercarrier had taken heavy damage during the battle, but it was still operational. Her crew was exhausted, but they had one goal now: find Emily and end this war once and for all. The coordinates of the alien stronghold were clear. Hidden deep within an asteroid field, the enemy's main base was a fortress, a place where the remaining alien forces had retreated to regroup. Earth's fleet, having dealt the alien armada a decisive blow, now had one last objective: rescue the child and destroy the alien command center. "Prepare the assault teams," Grant ordered, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "We're going in. No hesitation. We can't afford to waste another moment." The supercarriers deployed their remaining fighter drones, and the rest of the fleet moved into position. The asteroid field was a dangerous place, filled with massive chunks of rock that could easily destroy a ship. Earth's ships had to navigate through the field carefully, making sure they didn't fall victim to the natural traps hidden in the field. The enemy stronghold was somewhere in the heart of the field, and the only way in was through a narrow corridor, just wide enough for Earth's ships to pass through. "Here we go," Grant muttered under her breath as the Kestrel took its position, leading the charge. The ships moved forward cautiously, their shields up and weapons armed, ready for anything. They knew the alien base would be heavily defended, but they had no choice but to press on. The asteroid field was a labyrinth, and the aliens had created their stronghold within its heart. As Earth's ships neared the base, the first signs of alien resistance appeared. Large turrets mounted on the asteroids began firing, and the glowing outlines of enemy ships emerged from the darkness. The battle was far from over, and the aliens were determined to make a final stand. "Return fire," Captain Grant shouted, her fingers flying across the control panel. The Kestrel fired a volley of missiles, the powerful projectiles streaking through space and obliterating the alien turrets. The rest of the supercarriers followed suit, launching their own attacks to clear a path through the asteroid field. The sounds of explosions and laser fire echoed through the void as Earth's fleet pushed forward. The alien resistance was fierce, but it was clear that the enemy was already on the back foot. The earlier losses had crippled their defenses, and now they were desperate, throwing everything they had at Earth's forces. The supercarriers made their way deeper into the asteroid field, the glowing lights of their weapons lighting up the dark space. The tension inside the ships was unbearable. Everyone knew this was it, the final push to end the war and save Emily. But it wasn't just about rescuing one child anymore. The battle had become a symbol. It was humanity's stand against an empire that had believed it could take whatever it wanted without consequence. This was Earth's chance to show that they would never be cowed, that no one, not even the mightiest alien empire, could defeat the human spirit. As Earth's fleet neared the alien stronghold, the full scope of the enemy's base came into view. It was massive, a sprawling structure of metal and alien technology. The base was surrounded by powerful shields, almost impenetrable, but the supercarriers had come prepared. The battle had led them here, and now it would all come down to one final strike. "Fire all weapons," Admiral Jackson commanded, his voice commanding as he stood at the center of the battle. The fleet unleashed everything it had: missiles, drones, and laser blasts, pounding the alien stronghold with relentless firepower. The shields began to falter under the pressure. Slowly, but surely, the alien base began to crack, its once impregnable defenses giving way to the full force of Earth's retaliation. Then, the moment arrived. The base's core, the heart of the alien stronghold, was exposed, and the supercarriers focused all their remaining firepower on it. With a massive, blinding explosion, the core of the base was destroyed, and the entire structure began to collapse inward. The alien resistance crumbled, and in the wreckage, the fate of Emily lay in the balance. The final push was brutal. The supercarriers moved in, their drones streaming toward the crumbling alien base, searching for the lost child. Then, among the debris, they found her, Emily, unconscious but alive, held captive in the ruins of the alien fortress. "Mission complete," Grant said quietly, her voice filled with relief. The child was safe. Earth had won. Suspense hook. The final battle was over, but what would Earth do now? The aliens had been defeated, but the cost had been high. Could humanity ever return to normal after this war, or had they unknowingly opened a door to even greater dangers? As Earth's fleet made its way back to the safety of their home planet, the crew knew that the victory had come at a tremendous cost. The universe was vast, and the question now loomed large. Had they truly defeated the alien threat, or was this just the beginning of something far darker? The war was over, but the scars of battle lingered. Earth's fleet had returned victorious, with the battered supercarriers slowly making their way back to home soil. The journey back was solemn, despite the immense relief that flooded the hearts of humanity. They had defeated an empire, but at a cost. The toll of war, the destruction, and the loss of life were undeniable. Inside the supercarrier Kestrel, Captain Melissa Grant stood in the command center, staring out at the stars through the reinforced glass. It had been a hard-won victory, but the galaxy felt quieter now. The vast, empty expanse of space was no longer filled with the violent flashes of battle or the hum of laser fire. Instead, it seemed endless, almost cold. "Captain," came the voice of her second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Jensen, pulling her out of her thoughts. "We're nearing Earth. The fleet will be ready to land within the hour." Grant nodded, her mind still racing. She hadn't had a moment to process the gravity of what they had achieved. Defeating the alien empire, rescuing Emily, had been a victory, yes, but what did that victory truly mean for Earth? The child was safe, but the cost of the war had been steep. The aliens were gone, but had they left behind something worse? "Let's make sure this victory is worth it," Grant replied, her voice calm but firm. Meanwhile, the rest of the fleet had already begun preparations to return to Earth. The damage to the supercarriers was significant. Many ships were barely functional, their hulls scarred and twisted by the heat of battle. Yet, they had done their job. Earth had won. Humanity had proved, once again, that they could defy the odds. But there was no time to bask in the glory of victory. The universe, vast and unexplored, was still out there. Earth's leaders knew this would not be the last time their world would be threatened. What if there were more alien races out there, waiting for the right moment to strike? What if other enemies had watched Earth's victory with interest? Inside the Kestrel, the final preparations were underway. Captain Grant and her crew were about to face a world forever changed. As the supercarriers entered Earth's atmosphere, the fleet would be hailed as heroes. But the truth was, they all carried the weight of the unknown. On Earth's surface, the news of humanity's triumph spread quickly. People gathered in cities around the world, watching as the first supercarrier touched down, followed by the rest of the fleet. There were cheers, celebrations, and tearful reunions. Emily was returned to her family, and the news of her rescue was broadcast across the globe. Humanity had prevailed, and the alien invaders had been vanquished. But amidst the celebrations, there was also an air of uncertainty. The victory had been hard fought, and there were those who wondered if this was the end, or just the beginning. President Rachel Green stood at the podium, addressing the world. Her voice was strong, yet the weight of what had just happened hung over her every word. "Today, humanity stands united in victory," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd. "We have faced an unimaginable enemy, and we have defeated them. The alien empire that sought to destroy us has been brought to its knees. Our supercarriers have proven that we are stronger than any threat that comes our way. But as we celebrate, we must also remember that this is not the end. The galaxy is vast, and there are more unknowns out there. Our fight is over, but humanity's journey has just begun." Her words were met with a mixture of applause and unease. The war had ended, but the peace that followed felt fragile. There was a sense of hope, yes, but it was tempered with the understanding that the future was uncertain. Humanity had survived, but could they thrive? Could they hold their place in a universe filled with dangers they could hardly comprehend? Back aboard the supercarriers, the crews began to relax, but their minds were far from settled. They had just returned from the edge of destruction, and their world would never be the same. The losses they had endured, the friends and comrades who would never return, were still fresh in their minds. But there was also something else. The sense that, in defeating one enemy, they had opened a door to something greater. Admiral Jackson sat at his desk in the command room, watching as the final reports were transmitted to Earth's leaders. The supercarriers were damaged but functional, and the fleet was ready to dock. But Jackson's mind wandered to what lay ahead. The aliens had been a formidable force, but who else would come? How long would the peace last? "Admiral," came a voice over his communicator. It was Captain Grant. "We've completed the final check on the fleet. We're ready for landing." Jackson stood and walked over to the window, staring out at the stars. They had won, but the war had changed them all. The universe was vast, and Earth was just one small planet in the grand scheme of things. What would happen when the next threat came? "I'll be there in a moment, Captain," Jackson replied, his voice firm. Let's get ready for the future. It's time to rebuild. As the supercarriers touched down on Earth, the weight of victory was palpable, but so was the heavy air of uncertainty. The planet was alive with celebration, people everywhere rejoicing at the return of their heroes. But as the fleet landed and humanity's forces began to disembark, a subtle shift began to take place. There was something in the air that no one could fully understand. They had defeated the aliens, yes, but their world had irrevocably changed. The old order was gone. Captain Melissa Grant stood on the platform, her face expressionless as the Kestrel made its final descent. The cheers from the ground below echoed in her ears, but her mind was elsewhere, thinking of the horrors they had just left behind. Earth's victory had come with its own price, and even now, her body still carried the memories of the battle, the weight of lost lives, and the constant hum of survival. "You all did well," she said to her crew, though she could hear the tension in her own voice. The crew members nodded, though they knew, just as she did, that something more profound was waiting for them beyond the immediate celebration. The first responders were already there as the supercarriers made their final touchdown. There were medical teams, engineers, and government officials. The world would have to rebuild, physically, but also mentally. People had lived through a war, a violent conflict with a powerful alien empire. This wasn't something that would fade quickly. As Earth's fleet disembarked and walked among the throngs of cheering civilians, there were mixed feelings among the soldiers. Sure, the mission was complete. The human race had been tested, and they had come out victorious. But they couldn't shake the feeling that the universe wasn't done with them yet. The aliens they had defeated were only one part of a much larger galaxy, one that could contain even greater dangers. Admiral Jackson was among the first to step off his supercarrier. Though his steps were measured and calm, his mind was anything but. As he scanned the crowds, his thoughts drifted back to the vastness of space. The alien empire was gone, but had they been the only threat? How many others were out there, watching Earth with interest? And most importantly, were they aware of humanity's newfound strength? He couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as he looked out over the horizon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the landscape. Humanity had tasted victory, but what would come next? The battle with the aliens had been brutal, and the losses had been high. But there was no way to know if this victory would last. The universe was so much larger than they had ever imagined, and Earth had just made its first steps into the unknown. Weeks passed since the fleet's return. Earth had begun rebuilding its cities and its forces, but the question that remained in the minds of all who had fought was, what next? President Rachel Green was sitting in the war room, looking over the strategic reports. The alien fleet had been shattered, but there were signs that other races, smaller factions, perhaps were beginning to take notice. The human race had made a mark, but that mark had not gone unnoticed. Leaders from Earth were already planning for the future, unsure of what it would look like. "Are we ready for what comes next?" President Green asked, turning to her advisors. "We can't sit back and assume peace will last forever." Her question hung in the air as the room fell silent. The supercarriers were being rebuilt, but they had already sent out reconnaissance missions beyond the solar system. The reports had come back with disturbing findings. The galaxy, it seemed, was far from quiet. New powers were emerging. Unknown factions had begun to make their presence felt. The supercarriers might have won a battle, but the war, whatever it was, had only just begun. Meanwhile, aboard the Kestrel, Captain Grant and her crew were preparing for their next mission. The war with the alien empire had ended, but the new reality was sinking in. They had become Earth's protectors. Their success had come at a high price, but they had proven their worth. Now, humanity's future depended on them being ready for whatever came next. Grant sat at her desk, reviewing the latest intelligence reports. There were whispers of new alien factions, rising powers beyond Earth's reach. It was all speculative, but even the whispers held a truth. Humanity had drawn a line in the sand. The supercarriers were Earth's answer to any threat. No longer were they simply defending their home. They were staking their claim in the universe. "Captain," Lieutenant Jensen spoke from the doorway. "We've received new coordinates. A potential alien stronghold has been identified. It's not far from our position." Grant looked up from her desk, her face stern. "Prepare the crew. We leave in 1 hour." The time for celebration had passed. The universe awaited, and humanity was now a player in a much larger game. Earth's fleet was ready for whatever lay ahead. The aliens they had just defeated had been powerful, but the galaxy was vast, and they couldn't afford to ignore the rising shadows.